Hello, my name is Whitney Margaritas. I am a doctoral candidate at the University of Central Florida, and this talk is Fostering Autonomy, Chronic Pain, and Cannabis Care in Florida's Aging Population. Individuals with chronic conditions spend 14 times more than the average person on healthcare. Chronic conditions can have dramatic effects on a person's well-being and quality of life, and are often characterized by chronic pain. While they are not synonymous, chronic pain is a primary concern and symptom of chronic conditions. Older adults are significantly more likely to have chronic pain. In fact, while 20% of adults have chronic pain, 26% are aged 45 to 64, and 31% are aged 65 and over. A survey by the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services found that 78% of Medicare enrollees have chronic pain, with women experiencing higher rates than men. Cannabis has become a widely used alternative or complementary treatment for chronic pain. In Florida, cannabis has been legalized for medicinal use for qualifying conditions, and the rate of growth in the cannabis industry is quite high, with over 600 established locations since medicalization in 2016. And this year, Florida will vote on whether to legalize recreational use. With this study, I look to answer three distinct but interrelated questions. One, what factors increase or decrease the likelihood of cannabinoid use among older adults in Florida? Two, what role does aging play in the increased or decreased appeal of cannabinoid treatment? And three, what are the potential benefits and risks of cannabinoid use in older adults in Florida? To examine this, I recruited adults aged 55 and older through a few community organizations I've become connected to during my time doing preliminary field work in Central Florida. I set up a follow up to an 8-hour day with each participant in which I followed them through the course of their daily life and any activities they were doing that day. We concluded the day with an up to 1-hour interview in which I asked them some more focused questions. During the day, I also photographed material items within the home concerned with aging, pain, general health care, or cannabis use. I utilized a sensory methodology established by Sarah Paint in collecting data and field notes to help me focus my thoughts not only on use, but particularly the feelings and sensory perceptions of pain and treatment. Then, to analyze this data, I used both inductive and deductive processes to code the field notes, interviews, and photos. It's also important to note that my sample, while evenly split between male and female, was predominantly white and middle to upper socioeconomic status. In my preliminary analysis, I noticed a few universal themes that popped up often in my conversations with participants. All participants had experienced a change in lifestyle and increased need for healthcare. Many also discussed various barriers they came across in the biomedical system in care and treatment. But overwhelmingly, within each of these was a through-line theme of loss of autonomy. This could range from losing mobility, not being given choices, or running out of healthcare options. But often, the loss of autonomy experienced due to physical concerns resulted in loss of autonomy in activities and social abilities, which was often the bigger concern for participants. So looking at this loss of autonomy as a catalyst, I went back to my research questions to examine what I found keeping this key theme in mind. There are a few factors that made an individual more likely to use cannabis. First, many individuals said cannabis wasn't an option for them while working, but with retirement, they had the freedom to try it out. Some explained that they had used when they were younger, before it was made illegal, and had only stopped due to prohibition, or in some instances, never stopped. Additionally, some had hit a wall with the medical system. For instance, Mabel, one of my youngest participants, only in her 60s, explained that with new rigorous standards around pain medications, that while oxycodone was helpful in dealing with her pain, getting access felt burdensome. She said, "I don't like feeling like a criminal just because I have pain." The few individuals in my study who discussed being hesitant to use cannabis confessed that most of their hesitance was from lack of knowledge or expected stigma from their youth. Alma, a homebody in her 70s who grew up in a traditional household, said, "I just go pick it up. It's a drive-through, so I don't have to be embarrassed. The first time I had to walk into one, I was like, oh my God, but they're immaculate. They're cleaner than doctor's offices. They're like a lab or a doctor's office, and that helped a bit. I still have this running thing, though, of something in here of this just isn't right, but I'm doing it." I learned that most of my participants, even those more open about their use, will discuss their use within trusted groups, but do not discuss their cannabis use more broadly, as they fear being ostracized within the Central Florida community due to the conservative nature of the area despite medicalization. Individuals were more likely to use cannabis if someone they knew and trusted recommended it to them. For some, cannabis represented a healthier option than the prescriptions available. For Harold, a man in his 80s, when telling me about his choice to use cannabis over a sleep aid called Zolpidem, said, "I can sleep beautifully using either one of these, but I won't want to take a drug that's going to give me dementia when I know I can get dementia all by myself." These factors of increased appeal are not strictly related to aging. However, they are heightened by aging, as the potential risks of taking a new drug can be higher for someone over 55. While the factors of increased appeal are heightened by increased age, the same is not true for decreased appeal. Many felt that there were no short-term risks in using cannabis products outside of a potentially bad high and being confused in making choices around their treatment experience. But while they can't be sure of the long-term risks, they weren't really worried about them because, as Dorothy, a woman in her 70s, said, "I don't worry much about long-term problems because I'm not around long-term," right? The benefits were many, but there were two that I found most significant. Pain relief was a significantly reported benefit, but not for all. For some, they didn't feel it relieved their pain so much as it distracted them from it, allowing them to live their life more fully. Dorothy said, "It's easier to drift off from pain or just be with it. But when I have pain, it's overwhelming. It's demanding my focus, and cannabis allows me to let go of that." She talked about the importance of being able to unstick from her pain in order to connect and have deeper shared experiences with others, like sex, which she said is infinitely better when you're not just thinking about pain. While many may think of the benefit of cannabis being a fun recreational drug, therapeutic participants saw this just as a happy bonus feature. Raymond, 70s, said, "Do I like the head high? Well, sure I do, but it's the relief that keeps me coming back, not the head high." While most of the participants talked about the benefits at great length, some had serious concerns about how cannabis might affect them because of existing conditions or medications not related to their pain. Margaret, 70s, has extremely low blood pressure. As a vasodilator, cannabis presents a significant risk to her health, but it is also the only thing she's able to take to keep from waking up in pain at night. I've also discovered that within beneficial cannabis experiences, there is an interesting spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, there is the stigmatized user. This individual often only uses a single product. They may try a few and land on one that works, or the first one they try works well enough, and they never try any more. This individual often uses only the bare minimum therapeutic level and only uses in private, often not telling even their friends about their use. While on the other end of the spectrum, there is the connoisseur. They are unhindered by the stigma around cannabis and play around with their options. They know everything about the cannabis they're using, including whether it is an indica or sativa, what cannabinoids are present, what terpenes are present, and how each terpene affects them. And often, the connoisseur is more likely to discuss having used with friends. This spectrum is important, as those closer to the connoisseur are often the most helped and satisfied in their cannabis treatment. This project indicates the need for a few key changes. First, while the reclassification of cannabis at the federal level began earlier this year, it is yet to pervade. And reclassification alone will not fix everything, but may assist in cannabis gaining traction in being accepted into the broader medical community. Many of these individuals would trust the knowledge and advice of their physicians, but aren't finding any when looking, and are going it alone in cannabis treatment. Furthermore, the stigma surrounding cannabis use and the unwillingness to entertain its usefulness can often lead individuals to avoid discussing their use with healthcare providers. This lack of communication can increase risk to patients using cannabis, especially older adults, who are more likely to experience adverse drug reactions due to existing conditions and medications. It is imperative that efforts are made to destigmatize the use of cannabis and normalize its place in treatment of chronic pain. I would like to thank the Learning Institute for Elders at UCF for graciously funding this project through the Richard Tucker Gerontology Applied Research Grant, as well as my advisor, Shana Harris, for her constant advice and support. Thank you for listening to my talk.